All right, well, welcome to your first lecture in pre-AP US history. This is Mr. Womack, so you are in the right place. Let's go ahead and get started here. Before we get into the actual lecture, I want to talk about a couple of procedural things that you'll use throughout the year when you take these, so listen closely before you get started. The first thing is I would like for you to take all of these notes in a spiral notebook like we talked about in class, not in loose leaf paper. Those tend to get lost or at the bottom of your backpack, so make sure you're doing these on a spiral notebook. And make sure you bring that to class with you every day. Second thing is you need to really think about how you're taking these notes. If you have never really taken effective notes before, or you feel like the notes that you've taken just haven't really helped you, please come in for tutorials and talk to me, and I will show you how to take effective notes. If you've ever used Cornell notes, and if you're an avid, you should be very familiar with those. Those are the type of notes that I would like for you to take because I know that they are effective. They've helped students of mine for years and years, and they've come back to me from college and said, these are great, these helped me get through college, so I would like for you to do that. Next thing is, please do not think that you have to write every single thing on the slides. If you're smart here, and if you do this effectively, you'll just listen to me instead of frantically trying to write down everything that you see on the slides, because I will elaborate and I will give you additional information. I'm not just going to read off of the PowerPoint. Okay, so if you can get to where you can just listen to what I say and take notes from the things that I'm saying, then that's really going to help you at the next level when you get to college. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. Our first unit that we're going to cover here, and I know we've been talking about the West, but the West is kind of a part of this Gilded Age unit. It was happening at the same time, but the West, obviously, all of those things that we talked about were happening in the western part of the United States. The Gilded Age, as we know it, again, is that same time period, but the things that we're going to be talking about the next couple of weeks were things that were happening in the eastern part of the United States. So a lot of this is going to be surrounded around big business. So let's talk about the Gilded Age and kind of what that term means. Historians have given the Gilded Age to this time period, again, right after the Civil War and Reconstruction. And Mark Twain coined this term. And if you see here, gilded means to cover something of poor quality with gold. Now, what's the implication about American society? Well, if I went outside and got a brick and I put a gold covering over that brick and handed it to you and I said, look, this is a solid gold brick, it really wouldn't be worth anything. You could just scratch the surface off and see that that's just a brick that had been covered in this whatever gold spray paint, so it wasn't worth anything. And that's kind of what America, it's kind of how America was during this time period. When you looked at America, you saw the great economy and all of the new inventions and a high number of millionaires. But when you looked under the surface, you saw the poor working conditions and the poverty and the crime and all of the problems with immigration and corruption and all of these things that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next couple of weeks. So just keep that in mind as we go through this information the next couple of weeks. Okay. All right, so your subtitle I would like for you to put in your notes is the incorporation of America. And essentially what that means is kind of the rise of big business in America, how all of these mega businesses came to be in America, what helped them become what they were. So I'm going to give you some causes. These are your causes of rapid industrialization, and this is a time period where this was also going on in other parts of the world, particularly in Western Europe, in the United Kingdom, but it's where it really took off was in America. So our first two here that we'll look at is the steam revolution of the 1830s and 1850s, and then, of course, the railroad. The steam revolution of the 1830s and 1850s created the steam engine that would later be put to land transportation and is what we know as the railroad. Well, in the West, we talked quite a bit about the railroad. And as you know, so I'll go through this pretty quickly, the railroad really was the first big business in America. It was a magnet for financial investment. That means that if you invested in the railroad, anything in the railroad, you were going to make a lot of money. Okay, and you think about timber, and you think about steel, and all those things that you need to make the railroad. If you invested in those things, you would become very wealthy. As we know, we talked a lot about this last week. It was the key to opening the West. And of course, it aided the development of other businesses like we talked about, timber, steel, etc. Number 3, technological innovations. That just means inventions. Lots of inventions were created during this time period that helped this rapid industrialization that we saw in the United States. The first one here is the Bessemer and open heart process. This is a process to make steel, and they were already able to make steel before Bessemer's process, but what Bessemer did is he essentially divined a system to mass produce steel so that they could make lots of steel cheaper and quicker. The next one here are refrigerated cars, Gustavus Swift. So what this is going to really impact is the cattle industry, so that the cattle that we talked about in Texas and Kansas and out west now could be slaughtered and shipped back to the east and still kept fresh. The next one here, of course, when we talk about inventions, we have to talk about Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison had many patents. But what he's known for is the first one that you see there, the light bulb. So that's the one that we will talk about. There's Edison there and his light bulb. A little bit closer look at the light bulb. So why was this invention significant, and how did it help business and industry? That ought to be pretty obvious to you. Before the light bulbs, they used essentially lanterns with oil. Number one, that oil was pretty expensive, and 2, it was flammable. If it was knocked over and caught fire in some of these factories, it would burn the factories down pretty quickly. But with the light bulb, it made lighting much cheaper, safer, of course. You didn't have those spills that could catch your factory on fire, and it was brighter than most of the lamps and candles at the time. So in effect, what could happen is you could have workers working around the clock. You could essentially have a night shift. So your business owners were going to actually make more money because they could have workers working a longer period of time. And here are some others. Don't really need to know these as well. The motion picture camera. The big one was the light bulb that I want you to know. All right, the next big invention, and this one obviously is connected to the light bulb, is alternate current. If you don't know what alternate current is, just think about the plugs in the walls in your home. If you want to use your hair dryer, you just plug it into the wall. That's alternate current. When you come in a dark room, you flip the light switch. This is essentially alternate current. So huge invention that affected the light bulb, and other inventions that are now going to be able to be created and sold, and you can just plug them into the wall. Another big one here in terms of communication was the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell in 1876. So you think about the impact that this had on communication and business across the United States. And here we have an ad for alternate current. Another huge invention here with the airplane. You guys have, I'm sure, have heard of the Wright brothers. Now, this is going to impact many different areas. This is going to impact business. This is going to eventually impact the military. But Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, in 1903, another huge invention of this time period. I'm trying to just give you lots of inventions during this kind of 20 to 30 year time period. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is the assembly line. If you don't know what an assembly line is, I've given you a pretty simple definition here, dividing operations into simple tasks that unskilled workers can do. So, of course, what this is going to do is it's going to speed up production, and it's going to cut costs. So we know that Henry Ford really used this effectively. You can see in the pictures here in his factories to build cars. So what he's going to be able to do, he's going to be able to hire these unskilled workers and pay them a lower fee, so he doesn't have to pay those skilled workers. And because of the assembly line, he's going to be able to put these cars out much, much quicker. And I have a quote here for you. Henry Ford says, "I want to pay my workers so that they can afford my product." And that's exactly what he did. He was known for paying his workers a higher wage. And if you look here, you have sales data and price data. And 1909, we'll start there. If you look at the sales data, it really didn't sell any, but look at the price. The price up there was roughly about $950. Well, if we track it here and we go all the way to about, let's go to about 1919, you can see with the sales data here, roughly about $500, and they're selling close to 900,000 cars. And as the higher we go up in sales data, they're selling 1.5 million. Look how cheap the car is. And you can see the ad over here, $295 for a new car. Okay, so again, very significant invention that is going to change America. Now, he did not create the car. This was not new, but he made the car affordable so that the average person could buy them. Before, it was kind of just a rich person's toy. All right, so this is a chart that I wanted to show you because we're talking about inventions. Okay, and if you've never heard of that word patent, a patent is essentially something that you apply for when you have an idea. So let's say you have this idea and you want to create something and you don't want anybody to steal it. So you apply for a patent so no one can steal your idea. Well, if you look down here, roughly 1880 to the turn of the century is when you had the most patents. This is the time period that we're talking about in the Gilded Age. So again, many, many inventions that took place during this time period. All right, so back to our list. Number 4 is going to be unskilled and semi-skilled labor is in abundance. Now, we talked about all these new inventions and about the railroad, creating other industries. We needed workers. Okay, and as you can see from the picture, that is a ship, and those are immigrants coming off, most likely in Ellis Island. Well, all of these immigrants coming over, a lot of them don't speak English. They really don't have many skills, but they'll work hard. So these factory owners would hire them in large numbers and pay them a pretty cheap wage. And they never had a problem. You never had a problem finding a job in America during this time period. Number 5, a new talented group of businessmen and advisors. We call these people entrepreneurs. So we're going to talk about some of these people in the next couple of weeks. Of course, Henry Ford, Rockefeller, Carnegie. We'll talk about some of these guys over the course of the next week. Number 6, market growing as the U.S. population increased. So essentially there was a larger demand. You had more people coming into the country. Therefore, the market's going to grow. Therefore, you have a larger demand. So these business owners could produce more of their product and make more money because you had more people that wanted their product, the whole supply and demand idea. Number 7, the government is willing to help at all levels to stimulate economic growth. So the government's going to get involved and they're going to give government grants. They're going to help businesses because they want this to take off. They want business to grow, and they're going to be pretty hands-off, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. And then number 8, this is the big one that separates the United States from the United Kingdom and some of these other European countries. America had abundant natural resources, and most of those places in Europe did not. And I gave you a couple of examples here: water, timber, coal, and iron. Okay. And again, I didn't say this at the beginning, but obviously anytime if you feel like you need to pause this and catch up, then feel free to do that. Okay. All right, so in the next part here, I want to talk about some business terms. These are some terms that you're going to read about in class this week, and I want you to understand what these terms mean when you read about them. The first one is laissez-faire. In French means let do. You've probably heard of this before, But essentially what laissez-faire means is that these individuals or these businesses should be able to compete freely in the marketplace. This is competition, okay? This is capitalism. And laissez-faire really means, as you can see there, let people do as they please. So there was very little government interference in the economy. The government did not get involved and regulate these businesses the way that they do now. So business owners had more freedom to do what they thought was best for their business. Laissez-faire also relies on the supply and demand rather than government interference. Again, the big idea here that I want you to know is laissez-faire means let the businesses do what they want. Okay. Another factor of laissez-faire is low taxes, and of course business owners loved this, the fact that they did not have to pay as much money in taxes. All right, the next one is social Darwinism, and this fits right into this whole idea of big business and what was going on during the Gilded Age. Herbert Spencer, you really don't have to know him, you just have to know what social Darwinism was. And if you think back to your biology class that you had your freshman year, hopefully you remember natural selection and survival of the fittest. Well, essentially, he's going to apply this to the human species and to the economy. Spencer was an advocate of laissez-faire, and he felt that individuals and businesses must have absolute freedom to struggle, to succeed, or to fail. So social Darwinism essentially would say, we know that whole idea of survival of the fittest, the strongest are going to survive. Well, it's the same way with businesses. The stronger businesses are going to survive, and the weaker businesses are just going to kind of die out. And he says this is the natural order of things, and this is the way that it should be. Okay. All right, the next thing is a pool. This is not like the type of pool that you go jump into when you're hot in the summer. This is a business term, and a pool, if you've heard the idea of pooling something together, like you're going to all pool your money together, that means everybody is going to put their money in one big pile. Well, it's very similar to that. A pool is an agreement to maintain prices at a certain level, and it's done to stop prices from falling. So these business owners would get together and they would say, listen, we're not going to drop our prices below this level, because today what businesses do is they say, well, we're selling the same product, but I'm going to lower my product so it's cheaper so people will buy from me rather than him. And so you have that friendly competition. Well, a pool would be these business owners getting together and said, let's not drop our prices anymore. And so obviously this is going to help the business owner instead of the consumer. Okay, and if somebody did not like this idea, one of the business owners said, no, I'm not going to do this, and they're going to continue to drop their prices, this would be better for the consumer. But because these businesses got together and they said, no, we're going to do what's best for us, we're not going to drop our prices below this level, it was done in favor of the business owners. All right, the next one here is a monopoly, and you've probably already know what this is. Hopefully you've played the game Monopoly. If you've ever played the game Monopoly, the objective of the game is to own all of the different properties. And if you own all of the properties, anytime someone lands on your property that you own, they have to pay you. So you have essentially monopolized the board. Well, it's the same concept in the Gilded Age. A monopoly is when a single company achieves complete control of the market. That could be an oil industry, the steel industry, the railroad. That's when essentially there was no competition. There was only one company that you could get your oil from. So of course, what can they do to the price? They can raise the price whatever they want because there's no competition. Okay? Monopolies today are illegal, but they were legal during this time period until the government caught on and started passing some laws. Okay, now, next thing is a trust. I know this is a lot of information here, but please don't get overwhelmed by this. If you look at the last bullet, really that's all you need to know. A trust is just like a monopoly. Here's the difference. Instead of one company, there are several powerful companies controlling the market instead of one. Okay, and they're going to do what's best for themselves prices are still going to remain high. They're just going to go into this together so that they can control the market versus one company. So trust, think of trust just like a monopoly. Okay. All right, next thing is horizontal and vertical integration. Again, these are business terms. So these business owners are going to use horizontal and vertical integration to make more money. So let's look at vertical integration first. Okay, so we have vertical integration, and essentially here I've given you an example of what vertical integration is. And in this case, it's the meat industry. Okay, and the definition is the company owns all of the different businesses on which it depends for its operation. So if this is a cattle industry, the very first thing you need to look at is the cattle, right? That's kind of the backbone or the foundation of their business. Well, in vertical integration, if the company owns all of the different businesses which it depends on for its operation, just go up the ladder. Okay, the next thing is the slaughterhouse, where the cattle are slaughtered, where the company owns the slaughterhouse. Then the refrigerated cars, they own that. Then the cooled warehouses, they also own that. The meat packing plants, the delivery wagons, all the way up to the meat industry. So why is this effective, and why do business owners use this? Because if they own all of these things, they don't have to kind of pay that middleman. They don't have to pay anybody else. They own it all. So essentially, they're going to be saving money. The other one is horizontal integration. And take a look at the picture. Okay, you have your one big oil company here, and then you have 4 smaller oil companies. So your definition is combining firms that are the same business into one large corporation. An example of that would be buying out a smaller business, like a merger. Okay, and so this large business comes in, and they essentially force these smaller businesses out of business, or they can say, well, if you join with us, you'll still have some stake in the stock, but you won't go out of business. Okay, and Rockefeller did that with his oil industry. All right, so I wanted you to see this. This is this is in 1900, and this is billionaires, the percentage of billionaires in 1900. If you can see, the majority of your billionaires came from the railroad industry and from finance. Okay, but if we look 18 years later, you have a lot of different ways that you can become wealthy in the United States. Okay, again, turn of the century, it was just a couple. 18 years later, because of all of these things that we have been talking about, you have a greater chance of becoming a billionaire in America. All right, I think that's it. We're not going to go into this now, so we're going to go back. So that is it today. What I would like for you to do is you finish your notes. Make sure that you, if you're taking Cornell notes, which I hope you are, you go ahead and you write down any questions that you have, and then you go ahead and you do your conclusion down there at the bottom. And I'll let you know in class when our next lecture will be. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet. I believe that's going to be over unions, but I will let you know. Please bring your notes to class with you every day. When we do things in class, you can refer back to them.